As streaming radio has become really popular over the years, they have a lot of hours of content to fill. And a lot of times I notice they do takeovers where some famous musician will come in and give a list of all the albums and songs they listened to in their formative years. And I noticed a lot of them were awfully cool when they were 9 years old. A lot of people listening to Miles Davis or The Clash. Well, I don't buy it. I think they were listening to Barry Manilow. Maybe I just based that off of my own experience. But I'm going to give you a year-by-year critique of the music I was listening to when I was a kid. And spoiler alert, a lot of it's really embarrassing. So it was common knowledge where I grew up, to anyone that I knew, that I grew up in a family of musicians. My mom and dad had been playing together since the late 50s. My oldest brother was a great blues rock guitarist. My middle brother is a great drummer. So you would think that that would give me kind of a head start in the music department, and it really didn't. My parents, they played a lot of gospel, a lot of country, some stuff that would kind of bleed over into rockabilly and bluegrass. And I could tell pretty early on that was different than what the kids listened to at school. So that was just old people music, and I just kind of just one ear out the other. My brothers, they were in a hurry to get their lives started, and they were quite a bit older than me. One 13 years older, one 9 years older. So by the time I came into musical consciousness, they had all already kind of left the house. So all I really remember of them and music when I was a little kid is the door closed and hearing and that was about it. It could have been anything. So I was really kind of off on my own to figure out music. And I think 82 was the first year when I really started to listen to music. And the first thing I heard that just really, really grabbed me was Michael Jackson. And the first time I asked my mom to buy me an album, it was a cassette of Michael Jackson Thriller. And in 1982, that dominated my life. I had parachute pants. They had lots of zippers. I was in high school and digging through a box in the garage, and I found the glove. I had a single sequin glove. I used to try to moonwalk. It's quite embarrassing when you think about it. My dad had a business meeting and had someone over for dinner, and I was so proud of my dancing skills, which I'm sure were horrible. And over in the corner, I just started kind of putting on a show. And I think that was the closest my dad ever came to physically assaulting me. So yeah, Michael Jackson Thriller. So I think for each of these, it would be fair to give each of them a score on how well does the music hold up and how embarrassed am I by it. So I would say for Michael Jackson Thriller, I would say a 7 out of 10 on holding up. Honestly, I think the music holds up about 9 out of 10, but it gets brought down a little bit because Michael Jackson didn't hold up too well. Embarrassment level, I'd say middle of the road, 5 out of 10, because yeah, it's embarrassing, but everybody listened to Michael Jackson that was my age at that time. So in all fairness, like, what was I going to do? So anyway, that's 1982 for you. So Thriller for me bled into 1983, but the next album that really got me excited was a cassette I found at our house. And I'm pretty sure that it's my middle brother that left this around, even though it makes no sense. I've never asked him about it, but someone left a cassette copy of Prince 1999 at the house. And I put this in, and I was blown away. I loved it so much. And it's really strange. It had to be one of my brothers. And there's just no way it was my oldest brother. Middle brother doesn't really make sense too, but okay. Somebody was listening to Prince. This one, I think that the initial, without even thinking about it, you would think, you know what, Prince holds up pretty well. Everybody likes Prince. That album, I would say, holds up 2 out of 10. The song 1999 holds up quite well. The rest of that album, Little Red Corvette's pretty good. Those songs sound like garbage now. Delirious, Let's Pretend We're Married. There's like all these, it's like 80s pop crap. So I would say that's about the hold up level. Embarrassment level, I'd say 1 out of 10. There is nothing wrong with being a fan of Prince. I mean, ultimate multi-instrumentalist, musical genius, great guitarist, great singer, great dancer. Nothing wrong with that. So that was 1983. Now 1984 is the first time that I think rock and roll hit the scene, like actual rock music. And I visited my grandmother in Kerrville, Texas, and there was a neighbor kid, and he handed me a copy of Van Halen 1984. And this was a lot different than my 1982 and 83. You look at Michael Jackson and Prince. It's two people that my parents questioned their sexuality, and neither one of them could handle pharmaceuticals. Van Halen, that was something new. And at that time, I'm assuming this is a Bible Belt thing, there was a big movement within like Protestant churches at the very least that rock and roll is evil. You shouldn't listen to rock and roll. And it was being told to my parents, and there's a lot of pearl clutching going on. And it doesn't age well. It sounds silly now. But then at the same time, you look at the bands back then, they didn't do themselves any favors if they're trying to avoid that. Like, hey, here's a song by Ozzy called Suicide Solution. Here's a song called Hell is for Children. Here's one called You're Gonna Burn in Hell. There was plenty of ammo. And I look at this cassette, and there's like Van Halen, which I associate with heavy metal, even though not that heavy. And there's a baby smoking cigarettes on the front, and cigarettes are bad, and rock and roll's bad. And I listened to it, and I felt guilty, and it was the most wonderful guilt I've ever felt. And that got me into rock and roll, and I never really turned back. I've veered off into some other directions at times, but rock was always the centerpiece of all of it. So I think Van Halen 1984 started that. So 1985, I think, is the first time that my oldest brother Bob really helped me out on my influences. He came to visit, and I found a copy of ZZ Top Tres Hombres. And, Bob is... So first of all, Bob is a great guitarist. He's a great singer. He's a great musician. You can hear him on Spotify. Quick plug for him, Bob Erickson. He's got an album, Hammerhead Stew. It's awesome. It's from a few years ago. He still plays down in kind of the Floribama region, just tearing it up down there. So he gave me the gift of ZZ Top, whether he meant to or not. Apparently, I spent a lot of time rummaging around every time my brothers came to town or something. I don't know, but I was always finding music they left around. So what a creep. I still love that album, and I think holds up 10 out of 10 because, and that you can't actually say that about all ZZ Top because, ZZ Top is revered and thought of as cool. It's funny because like a later album, Eliminator, actually doesn't age near as well. It actually sounds very 80s. Because they, I think a lot of bands fall into this as hey, synthesizers are big now. We got to keep up with the times, so let's include a synthesizer. And now that sounds really 80s, where the music from the 70s could be released now. Also, lyrically, I think sometimes ZZ Top stuff will be kind of a lot of play on words and that have to do with sex, and it kind of sounds like something a junior high kid would write or something. That's not on this album. And so love it, and absolutely 1 out of 10 on embarrassment. No embarrassment for loving that album, still do. So 1986 is a big one because 5150 by Van Halen came out. It was the first album with Sammy Hagar, and my brother Bob, once again, his influence coming in here, he gave me my first electric guitar that year. My dad had a guitar around the house, but it was very nice. And at one point, when I was in like second or third grade, I stepped on it and broke a pick guard that is just like completely irreplaceable. So let's just say my time on that guitar was very limited and watched closely. But now I had my own guitar, a little Strat copy, and 5150 came out, and this was the first album that I purchased with my own money. And I remember buying it at a Kmart in Weatherford, Texas, and I'm listening to it in the car with my mom, and she's just kind of like, oh my God, what is this? And I became so obsessed with that. And to this day, there's so many pieces of my guitar technique that I learned from listening to that album. And so as far as the way it holds up, it's tricky because some of the rock songs on there hold up pretty well. You know, like Good Enough, Summer Nights, Best of Both Worlds. Those songs hold up, especially for 80s like guitar rock. A lot of the singles that were big, like Why Can't This Be Love, Dreams, stuff like that, that's really keyboard driven, sounds very 80s. So I would say it holds up about a 4 out of 10. Embarrassment, 1 out of 10. There is no shame in being a guitarist listening to Van Halen. So yeah, I love that album. And I still love about a third of it. But anyway, 1987 hurts a little bit. This was the year that I absolutely fell in with Def Leppard Hysteria. I burned through this album so many times. I learned every note on guitar. I loved every song on there. For a while, I got awfully sick of Pour Some Sugar on Me, but the rest of it, I loved like every single song on it. And even when I started to listen to other music that rendered that music really, really uncool, I still would go back and listen to it sometimes. I remember going to a party in like 1993 and somebody was playing that. And I had some friends with me that were way too cool for that were all alternative rock people. And they were like, oh God. And like, they were like, we got to get out of this party. And I was kind of like, man, I'm sorry. I love this. And I actually went and saw Def Leppard when I was probably like 19. So this was a few years after they were cool. I stuck with them. I still, to this day, have not understood hardly a word the singer has said. It's just really hard to understand. They have these ridiculous effects on the vocals where everything is just this massive wall of harmonies, and I don't know. There's so much that should be wrong with that just isn't. And I've met I think 3 different people from that band over the years. I met Phil Collen, Steve Clark, and then Vivian Campbell, who replaced Steve Clark. Just like at random guitar shows and stuff, just totally separate incidents. But yeah, that was the first album of Rick Allen, is that the drummer's name? Of him not having one of his arms, and it made them change their sound. And I just thought what they did with it was so great at the time. I don't think it aged very well. You know, if I think back, I haven't listened to that album in years and years, but I would figure that all the guitars and like heavy chorus and like the vocal effects I mentioned, it probably sounds really lame now. So I'm gonna give that about a 2 out of 10 on how it aged. An embarrassment level, I'm gonna say that's a solid 8 out of 10. But they did do something at the time that was different than anybody else was doing. Maybe out of necessity, but yeah, that was that year. Sorry. 1988 was the year I went metal. And this is one of those where I can tell you exactly where I was. I was in the back seat of my parents' car in front of Taco Bell in Benbrook, Texas. And there was this metal station, Z-Rock. And I would listen to it when we were traveling in like Dallas. To a lesser extent, Fort Worth. A lot of times it would kind of start to go fuzzy because it broadcast way out of like Gainesville and it didn't have a very strong signal. And they said that they were going to preview the new Metallica song One. And funny enough, I had never heard a single note of Metallica before then. I said somehow missed out on that. I know that I associated Metallica as with the people who I would see wearing the Metallica shirts at school. And they were always, it was basically like the uniform for school detention. It was the people who were always in trouble. It was the people from the wrong side of the tracks. It was the people who had parents in prison for meth. I mean, it was like, they were real like trouble. That was like loser music. And I never had anything against it. I just kind of associated with like, I don't know. That's just what I saw of it. And then I heard this song and I was so blown away. And I was like, and I immediately was like, oh my God, I have to find out, where do I find this song? And so I was like going to the stores and finding the Metallica albums, and all I could find was Master of Puppets, Ride the Lightning, Kill 'Em All. And it's because it was a preview and Justice for All wasn't out yet. And so I was like going nuts. And then I was like talking to people about the song who I knew were Metallica fans. And these guys are kind of like, why is the football player talking to me? And I'm like, oh my God, but that song, that, and they're kind of like, yeah, man, yeah, that song rocks, and they hadn't heard it. So I didn't know that I would actually heard it before other people who actually listened to the band. And so when that finally came out, I bought it, and I was so obsessed with that album. I just ran through that over and over and over again. I was trying to learn every note on guitar. And it was crazy because I would while I was like riding around, I would like try to learn all the drum parts with my feet and hands. Didn't even have a drum set. I knew every lyric on it. I just was so into it. And so once I got into that, I had some friends, that were into Metallica already, and they were kind of like, well, yeah, Metallica's awesome. You didn't know that? And here, I made a copy of Master of Puppets for you. Here's Ride the Lightning. Here's Kill 'Em All. And did it hold up? Yeah. Yeah, 10 out of 10. Like, everybody that plays metal now is playing something that is birthed from, not necessarily that album, but, early Metallica. Heavy metal is a lot heavier and more extreme now. But yeah, and embarrassment, absolutely none. 1 out of 10. I'd go 0 if I had that on the table. Okay, so it sounded like I was getting pretty non-embarrassing there, but 1989, I went astray. I went deer hunting with my dad, and we went to Walmart, and I looked and saw a cassette tape that all I could see on it was the guys in the band looked cool, which meant they were basically a hair band. And it said something about warning extreme lyrics or explicit lyrics, whatever the stickers used to say. I'm like, okay, all right, you got me. I'm interested. And so I bought the self-titled debut by the band Extreme. And I think that was my first true Guitar Hero album where I got something by someone. Nuno Bettencourt was just this, like, I thought Kirk Hammett Metallica was like, really, really, really good. And then I heard what Extreme did. And that sent me down the rabbit hole of listening to people who played guitar better than I would ever be able to. It's just frustrating because I would listen to Extreme, or I'd listen to Joe Satriani, or I would listen to Steve Vai, and all these like 80s guitar gods, and they played so fast and it was so like based on classical music, and it just wasn't even attainable. So like I can kind of see like there's a certain beauty in being able to just hit play on an AC/DC album, and there's a decent chance I can play every note on that thing. And there's also a decent chance if I listen to Satriani or Vai or Paul Gilbert or any of these, guitar guys, like I might be able to play the rhythm, and the rest of it I'm just like, oh, that sounds cool, but but I was into that. I was always like, I was into that whole year. I was listening to that stuff. So yeah, I took a total blind flyer on this Extreme album, knowing nothing about them except the name of their band sounded cool and they looked mean, and it said that it had bad words. And at that age, that was enough for me. And I listened to that album a lot that year. I also think that I know that Metallica was still going strong. I know that I listened to a ton of Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. And, everything back catalog Metallica, and of course Pantera, all that stuff from the year before was still going strong. But I had this Extreme thing going too. I remember I told one of my friends, he had been gone for the summer, and I was like, hey, so have you heard that album by Extreme? And he was like, yeah, I mean, he's like, they're really good, but they're really glam. And I was like, glam? I'd never heard that term. And I don't think it was that new of a term. I think I just grew up in the country and wasn't aware that there was this big difference between Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer over here, and then everything over here with these like Poison and Warrant and all that stuff is over here. And I just heard guitar loud, and I mean, I knew there was a difference. I just thought it was less heavy. But then I kind of start to look. I was like, oh, wow, these guys wear a lot of makeup. These guys really do a lot of primping before they play, and so there was that. But yeah, Extreme album, I would say holds up 1 out of 10. That is the most glam sounding crap. Their next album, like More Than Words and that Wholehearted songs that they got really big on with acoustic, those probably hold up because an acoustic ballad's always going to hold up. But embarrassment level, 10 out of 10. My God. So I think 1990 was mainly the year of Anthrax, State of Euphoria. And this is one of these years that I led a little bit of a double life, because on one hand, I got into Anthrax, and once I heard State of Euphoria, I went and bought Among the Living. And once I heard that, I was like, okay, I'm going to go buy Fistful of Metal. And then I was obsessed with Anthrax. I loved thrash metal now. I was getting into it. I was getting some other albums here and there by other artists that I was trying out. And this was also the year that I heard Pantera, Cowboys from Hell. So I had that going. At the same time, I had just started going to school in Toller, and I discovered that there was actually country music that was new that I liked. Somebody said, hey, here, listen to this, and see if you can learn any of the guitar on it. Because they knew I played guitar rock, but they're like, oh, well, country's better, and these are all these guys just always listen to country. And somebody handed me Garth Brooks, No Fences, and I listened to it, and I'm like, I love this. And that led me into a little country phase, and I got Alan Jackson, and went back and was like, you know what, I should try out some of this older country stuff. I think I like George Jones. I think I like Willie. I think I like Waylon. I think I like Merle, Johnny Cash. So there was a country phase, and that phase never really went away, but it never really took off either. Like I'll get to where I want to hear some country sometimes, and I'll work it in. I'll say the 70s country aged better than maybe 90s country, because 70s has got such an attitude to it. But still, if I would have to go with one, I would say the album of that year for me was State of Euphoria by Anthrax. I think it holds up pretty well. 8 out of 10. Embarrassment level, no, no, 1 out of 10. I love Anthrax, and I think that they did themselves a good job of weathering the storm when grunge came along, and then new metal came along. A lot of bands freaked out and changed their sound. Um, you look at Judas Priest during new metal. They had a new singer that looked like Fred Durst, and he was trying to rap. I mean, they had Metallica cut their hair. All these bands like freaked out, and because they just thought it was over. And then you had bands like Anthrax, who pretty much stayed the course. I know when they switched singers, it was during the grunge era, and that's a little bit. Sound of White Noise is kind of grungy, but it was still them. Some bands didn't change at all. Megadeth, Slayer, Pantera, they were just like, we don't care. This metal isn't dead. We're gonna do what we're gonna do, and if you want to laugh at us, go ahead. And they were kind of punchlines for a little while. And guess what? New metal, everybody got sick of it, and everything worked its way back. And it's really similar to how classic rock bands handled disco. Everybody thought, oh my God, everything's disco now. This is the way it's going to be forever. So you had like Rolling Stones put out Miss You, disco song. Pink Floyd put out Run Like Hell, disco. I Was Made for Loving You by Kiss, total disco song. These aren't bad songs by any means, but the beat of it, it was like, hey, we really got to do, we got to be like John Travolta, whatever. And you're so much better off just staying the course, usually. I'm sure that's hard to do. And I know a lot of times your record label probably drop you if you don't change. So, anyway, that's me going off on a tangent. But, yeah, Anthrax. Yay. 1991 was the year that I first heard Nirvana Nevermind. Like I've said before, Smells Like Teen Spirit was one of those songs that I know exactly where I was when I first heard it. Got the album, I listened to it a lot. Pearl Jam 10, listened to it a lot. Primus, Sailing the Seas of Cheese, loved it. I still think that the album that I listened to most that year, oddly enough, is The Doors' Strange Days. I know that at some point I saw the Doors movie, loved it. I used to listen to like I'd be at a friend's house and he had like some greatest hits double CD that we would listen to. I think what may have happened is I may have just been somewhere and saw a Doors cassette for sale. I used to shop at pawn shops a lot for tapes, and I probably just grabbed that one. And it's actually my favorite one still. It's not just, it's got a couple of big songs on it, but like the deep cuts on that are so good. And yeah, I don't know. The Doors aren't for everybody, but I love that. And a lot of times, every time people talk about the Doors, it's always Jim Morrison. But I actually really dig their music. It's the kind of jazzy, psychedelic, organ, I don't know. I like their music, and yeah, sometimes Jim Morrison is just doing some bad poetry or something, but I don't know. I like him. Whatever. 92 is an easy one. That was my senior year of high school, and there was one tape that played in my truck the entire time. And there was some other stuff that came out that year that I listened to at home some, but in the car, it was Pantera, Vulgar Display of Power, every day, nonstop. I loved that album so much. Still do. Just from second one of that to the very end, I love every minute of it. That was the first time that I don't know. I mean, I thought Dimebag Darrell was great already, but that was just a whole different level. And it was quite a bit heavier than Cowboys from Hell. And yeah, that one totally holds up. I would say 9 out of 10. And then Embarrassment Level 1. Yeah, love it. Okay, so that's it. It's definitely not underground. It's definitely not cool. I basically was a small town guy that if somebody handed me something and I liked it, I liked it. And if I didn't, I didn't. And that's how it worked out. As promised, I try to always throw in some kind of music at the end of these videos. I hope people are aware of that and don't think that and don't just leave. But I don't think that I am overselling this, telling you that I have created one of the odder mashups you will hear in the next few months to years to decades. So enjoy. Thanks, everyone.
On the floor, in the round.